You know, I can't help but feel like 2017 is just the year of John Denver, and especially the song Take Me Home Country Road. I feel like I've heard that song in nearly every movie that has come out this year. Alien Covenant, Logan Lucky, and now this. I'm not complaining by any means, just observing. Hi, I'm Danny Quinn, and welcome to another episode of First Impressions. On today's episode, the Kingsmen are back as they team up their American counterparts, the Statesmen, to take on the Golden Circle. The plot of the movie is that the Kingsman agency has to deal with a new threat in the form of the mysterious criminal, Poppy, played by Julianne Moore, who is able to successfully bring the organisation to its knees after a series of coordinated missile attacks that eliminate most of the Kingsman's agents. In the aftermath, Agents Eggsy and Merlin, played once again by Taron Egerton and Mark Strong, travel to the United States to team up their American counterparts, the Statesmen, as they try to figure out why they were attacked and stop Poppy from enacting her scheme for world domination. The original Kingsman, released in 2015, was a bit of a surprise when it first came out. I don't think many people were expecting it to be as good as it was. It was a very funny and very entertaining send-up of the James Bond movies of the 60s and 70s. Helped by Matthew Vaughn, the director of Kick-Ass, it pretty much did for spy movies what Kick-Ass did for superhero movies. And obviously, because the original film was a fairly big hit, a sequel was inevitable. And I was pretty excited to see where the series would go in the second film. But I'm not gonna lie, I was also a little bit worried as well. It's really difficult for me to explain, but as its release date loomed, I just had this bad feeling about the movie. Maybe it's because they brought back Colin Firth even after what happened to him in the first movie. Maybe it's because we've had so many underwhelming and lackluster sequels this year that it felt bloated and overindulgent. But I just had a bad feeling about the movie going into it. And having seen the film, I gotta say officially that no. This movie doesn't quite match its predecessor. Does that mean I think it's bad? No, not at all. I think it's a pretty solid sequel overall. It very much delivers what you want from a Kingsman movie. But at the same time, I can see why some people would view that as a deal breaker, because this movie in a lot of ways does feel like a typical sequel. It basically takes a lot of what people liked about the first movie and does it on a much bigger scale. But like a lot of sequels that go bigger, it's not necessarily a better film for it. And the movie does suffer from a lot of the typical sequel problems. For one, it is a little bit bloated. I don't think it's quite as overstuffed as some people are saying it is, but it does feel a little bit like there's too much going on in places. There's a lot of subplots fighting for attention in this movie. For instance, there's a subplot with Eggsy and his girlfriend, the Swedish princess, who was a very minor character in the first movie who's been given a much bigger role here. We see how doing his duties and saving the world does put a bit of a strain on their relationship, especially whenever Eggsy is forced to seduce a woman at a certain point in the film. I thought there was potential in that subplot, especially considering Eggsy is technically cheating on his girlfriend, even if he is asking her permission to do it, just for the greater good. I thought that actually did have potential, but it doesn't really go anywhere. It's not really addressed in a satisfying way, and it's just sort of glossed over afterwards. And the return of Colin Firth's Harry is a real mixed bag. The way they try to explain his return in this film is really silly, but I can kind of buy it because this is Kingsman we're talking about. However, whenever we first see him in this movie, he's not the Harry that we know from the first movie. He's suffering from memory loss, he's obsessed with butterflies, and he's reverted to this very childlike state. But all it did was just bog down the movie for me. It reminded me a little too much of Men in Black 2, where they're trying to restore Tommy Lee Jones's memory. It's one part of the movie that could have been cut down or considerably shortened. And then there's also this weird subplot involving the President of the United States, played by Bruce Greenwood, and his chief advisor, played by Emily Watson. There are these two characters that are introduced about an hour into the movie, when Poppy decides that she's going to try and get the President to bow down to her demands, and the President then decides that he's not going to. I can see why this was included in the movie because it does a serviceable job in raising the stakes and emphasising just how much is at risk if the Kingsmen fail in their mission, but at the same time, a lot of these scenes feel very divorced from the movie's narrative. Another thing I did take issue with, and maybe this is just a nitpick more than anything, I didn't think the movie utilised its characters as well as it could have. For instance, there are certain characters from the first movie who had prominent roles in the original film, and then they're just sort of tossed aside in a very underwhelming manner, and they're not utilised throughout the movie at all. And then there's some of the new characters as well, such as Channing Tatum's Tequila, who despite the marketing really pushing his character, he's not in the movie that much, which is a shame because he was entertaining in the very few scenes he had. Likewise, this movie also has Jeff Bridges playing the head of the Statesman, and he's barely in the film too. He just sort of shows up every now and again sitting down and cracking a joke. but not that often. So that's all the stuff I didn't like so much about the movie. And make no mistake, there's a lot of stuff about this movie I did really like. It's still a very funny movie. There's some really good jokes and some really good humour. The action scenes are just as fun as ever. They're brilliantly filmed, edited and choreographed. The opening sequence of the film where Eggsy's being chased through London as Prince's Let's Go Crazy plays is definitely a major highlight of the movie. And there's a lot of parts in the film's climax that did really have me smiling with glee. And the characters are just as good as ever. I know I was very mixed on the return of Harry in this film and how he was portrayed, but once they actually get past the whole amnesia subplot, I like the direction they take the character in this film. He's struggling to adapt to only having one eye, and there's some really funny moments where he's trying to shoot somebody or he tries to attack somebody, and it just kind of backfires on him. There's a very entertaining scene in this film where he attempts to deal with these rednecks in a similar manner to how he dealt with those thugs in the bar in the original film. He attempts to do the same thing here, only it backfires on him and he gets his ass handed to him. It's a nice little callback and a clever spin on the bar fight from the original. And Firth is still great in the role of Harry. He brings a lot of charisma and charm to the role, and he's still very good in the action. And it's nice to see him come back, admittedly, even if the explanation for his return is very silly. Taron Egerton is still very likeable in the lead role as Eggsy. He's really good in the action scenes, has a nice sense of humour, and he's good chemistry with Firth as well. There's a really good dynamic between the two of them, and it's nice to finally see them teaming up together in this movie. Mark Strong once again plays Merlin, and he's still really entertaining. I really like the scenes between him and Eggsy, which are a lot of fun, and most of the new cast are very enjoyable too. I really liked Halle Berry's ginger ale, even if she is somewhat underutilised. Pedro Pascal really impresses as Whiskey, and there's a lot of fun stuff involving him and his lightsaber lasso, which is definitely one of the main highlights of the movie. And as much as Channing Tatum and Jeff Bridges are both criminally underutilised, I did enjoy them quite a bit too. But out of the new cast, the main highlight is easily Julianne Moore's Poppy. She's this massive caricature of 50s nostalgia, mixed with a very perky smile, but you can tell just beneath that smile lies a heart of psychotic menace. The very first scene she's in, she forces her new recruit to murder his friend, whom she then turns into a burger that she forces the recruit to then eat. It's an excellently twisted moment of dark comedy that does a fantastic job of establishing just how evil Poppy is. And Moore is excellent in the part. Every time she is on screen, she is brilliant. And you can tell she is really having a blast playing this very kooky and very quirky villain. She's not quite as good as Samuel L. Jackson was in the original, but she's still a very good villain in her own right. And there's a lot of other things I really liked about this movie too. There's a very amusing turn from Elton John, who's in the movie a lot more than you would expect. Some might find his appearance in this film to be a little bit self-indulgent, but I personally find it very enjoyable despite that. He really brings it to the role and he's very funny. The setting of Poppyland is great. I love how it's shaped like this town from a 50s movie and there's all these robots running around. The musical score by Henry Jackman is also really good, even if it does sound a little bit generic in places. And the directing is mostly very solid. For all the film's flaws on a writing level, the directing does make up for that. Vaughn really brings a lot of flair and style to the directing in this film. And the film as a whole is still pretty solid overall. It's just that it has to stand next to the original Kingsman, and while some sequels can do a solid job of bettering or at least equaling their predecessors or almost equaling their predecessors, this one just doesn't quite manage to do it. It just doesn't really compare to the original film. It doesn't really do anything new or interesting to shake up the formula in any way. And I don't necessarily blame Vaughn and co-writer Jane Goldman for doing that. In fact, I'm probably more forgiving of sequels rehashing their predecessors than most people are to a certain extent, especially if the first movie was just that good. And when it comes to rehashed sequels, this is probably one of the better examples, because at the very least, it doesn't reset the characters back to how they were at the start of the first movie. It doesn't make the original film seem pointless by comparison. It's a fun film with excellent action and humour that did have me laughing most of the time. The cast are all excellent and it is a very ambitious sequel, but at the same time, it is a little bit too ambitious, admittedly. It's a little overstuffed with subplots and characters, especially considering that the movie runs well over 2 hours. Despite that, it is an enjoyable sequel, and I would recommend it, especially if you're a fan of the original film. I'm gonna give Kingsman: The Golden Circle a 7 out of 10. I realise that this film has proven very divisive, and I can understand why some people are not liking it or outright hating it. But I'm definitely not one of them. I really enjoyed this film. It's definitely not as good as the first film, but how was it supposed to be? I feel like they did really try to recapture the magic of the original, but sometimes you just can't capture the same creative lightning twice. Thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll be back soon with more reviews in the future, but in the meantime, feel free to like the video, leave a comment, and subscribe to my channel. If there's anything I can do to improve my presentation, let me know. I can also be found via Facebook, Twitter and Instagram, and until next time, I'm Danny Quinn, and I hope you have a pleasant evening.